A billionaire's incredible 30-day journey to save a dying girl. What happened next will shock you. Ethan Parker leaned back in his sleek leather chair, surrounded by the skyline of New York that felt somehow distant. The phone rang, a simple motion that shattered his world. He answered and was met with Sarah's weary yet hopeful voice filled with desperation. Lily, only 8, was fighting a rare illness, and her mother had been treading water beneath the weight of spiraling medical bills. A mix of urgency and guilt gripped Ethan's chest, an ache unfamiliar yet undeniable. Here he was, a self-made billionaire known for high-profile philanthropy, yet nothing filled the void within him. Had he spent years in pursuit of success, eclipsing the very humanity he professed to cherish? The conversation triggered a tidal wave of emotions within him. Sarah's voice flickered with the resolve of a warrior, fighting against circumstances that felt insurmountable. They discussed Lily, dreams etched in her young eyes, and Ethan's heart twisted. He had once dreamed of fatherhood, a connection that crumbled under the weight of his ambition. Recognition of his estrangement from his own daughter surged forward, forming a crippling knot of regret in his gut. How could he dedicate himself to saving Lily when he couldn't even reconnect with the daughter he lost in the shadows of his greed? Days turned into sleepless nights, weighed down by mingled emotions of guilt and obligation, as Ethan resolved to spend the next 30 days raising awareness for Lily. He enlisted the help of Sarah, their lives suddenly intertwined. As he collaborated closely with her, witnessing her unyielding dedication and love, Ethan's bitterness started to crack. The tension built with every interaction, every shared laugh accompanied by a shadow of his past choices, pressing harder against his conscience. Yet it was not without challenge. Conversations with his associates revealed a stark truth about his perceived motives. "This is just a PR stunt," they'd mock, referencing his troubled history. Their ridicule drove a sharp dagger of doubt deep into his heart. What was he doing? This felt more meaningful than anything his wealth could secure. Yet each sneer cracked the fragile facade of confidence he attempted to maintain. Could he endure this path of authenticity when the stakes felt so high? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. He organized a high-profile charity gala, every detail planned with the precision of a seasoned businessman. The hope was palpable, but fate intervened. Investigative reporters unraveled dark threads of his past, scandals his wealth had hidden beneath a glossy surface. What should have been a celebration turned into a public spectacle. The reports didn't just tarnish his reputation, they recoiled back on Sarah and Lily, tearing into their world of fragile hope. Media buzz swirled like a storm cloud around them, with sharp words that struck deep. Standing in front of his mirror, Ethan wrestled with despair. How could he repair this? To offer help while his name was being dragged through the mud? The painful image of his daughter flashed before him, each breath a reminder of lost time. The pressure mounted as he recognized the profound disconnect between his life of privilege and the sacrifice of those who had fought their battles without the luxury of wealth. What had he learned about connection? In that crushing moment before resurrection, he realized true charity needed more than money. It required genuine empathy, understanding. With everything hanging by a thread, Ethan faced the plunge into uncertainty, a choice looming. Could he become the man of real substance while deceit threatened to engulf him? The unresolved question danced in the air, leaving Ethan trembling on the precipice of transformation. Ethan stood motionless, his own reflection staring back at him, a stranger cloaked in shame. As he replayed Sarah's vulnerable voice in his mind, a question began to germinate. Was it too late to transcend the shadows of his past? He needed to act, not just for Lily and Sarah, but for himself. Clarity pierced through the fog of his despair. He was too far from integrity, too entrenched in the armor that wealth had built around him. He had to step into a different light, one that meant confronting not only public opinion, but also the demons he had long ignored. Determined, he directed his focus inward for the first time in years. He envisioned his daughter, Chloe, who lived out of reach, her laughter reminiscent of childhood dreams unfulfilled. The thought triggered a wave of urgency to step beyond the confines of his gilded prison, to do something authentic amidst this tempest, something real. Through the storm of headlines, Ethan honed in on a plan. He would pivot his strategy from mere fundraising to advocacy. This meant loud and unapologetic conversations about health inequity and systemic flaws in medical funding, topics that resonated deeply with Sarah's plight. He envisioned himself attending town hall meetings face-to-face with politicians, pushing for policy changes that would provide accessibility in healthcare. The old Ethan, woven into glamorous soirees and data-driven business negotiations, seemed a ghost compared to this new vision. Armed with genuine urgency and a readiness to embrace vulnerability, he reached out to Sarah. Their discussions became more than plans. They morphed into heart-stirring dialogues about love, sacrifice, and moral responsibility. In sharing Lily's story openly, he would light a fire that could spark a collective movement, inviting others to join in their pursuit of justice rather than mere charity. Yet, just as the path began to light up, the darkness re-emerged. The tabloids intensified their scrutiny, eager to sensationalize every slip, from Sarah's emotional falters to Ethan's unpolished outreach efforts. The venomous words echoed in Ethan's mind. He's just a broken man trying to redeem himself. The pressure to pivot back to old habits screamed louder than him, but he resolutely resisted. Could he be the face of a new type of philanthropy, one grounded in sincerity? Ethan plunged into action. He attended rallies under the cover of anonymity, gathering undiluted perspectives from families who lived on the brink of financial ruin due to medical bills. Conversations with single parents, veterans fighting for healthcare access, and ordinary citizens left fragments of humanity deep in his psyche. They ignited a sense of purpose that transcended his earlier wealth, each story folding into the growing tapestry of his resolve. The moment arrived when he called Chloe, the daughter he had so shamefully neglected. What should have been a simple conversation grew into an emotional landslide as he tried to share his journey with her. Would she understand? Could she find it in her heart to accept a father trying to learn and grow, despite his failures? The anxiety was suffocating, yet exhilarating, as he felt a weight lifting, the possibility of rebuilding, of forgiveness. As he hung up the phone, raw emotions swirled fearlessly inside him. He was moving towards something unprecedented, a genuine connection. But an unsettling notion bubbled up. Vulnerability bore its own risks. Could this newfound path alienate Sarah and Lily? What if he couldn't balance his resolve to champion for others with reconnecting with the ones he loved? The stakes were rising, and the air felt heavy with prophetic tension. With every choice he made, he was teetering on the edge of transformation. Yet lurking behind the corner was the uncertainty of what this new aim might cost him, pushing him toward a truth more profound than all his previous endeavors. The time had come to face the deepest fears he had tried to sidestep for years, leaving Ethan questioning whether he could stay the course. Ethan spent the following days grappling with conflicting emotions, navigating between the exhilaration of change and the creeping doubt gnawing at his resolve. Each morning, the weight of his new mission settled on him like a heavy cloak,
invigorating yet suffocating. The once warm shadows of his home and wealth now felt stifling. Rooms filled with luxurious furniture became a stark reminder of the emptiness he had long ignored.
His conversations with Sarah opened pathways to pain he had sheltered for years, yet they also fortified him. The deeper they delved into Lily's situation, the more Ethan felt an urgent need to act, not just as a benevolent donor, but as a loud advocate demanding systemic change. He crafted speeches in the quiet solitude of his study, rehearsing with each word how he would introduce Lily's story to a skeptical audience. The audience didn't just need to hear the statistics, they needed to feel the heat of injustice, a simple reality ignited by a child's struggle. Yet the insidious whispers of doubt clouded these ambitions. Although the resolve to shake off the specter of his wealth anchored him, Ethan feared exposing his vulnerability, sharing the true depths of his transformation. The world he once reveled in thrived on image and perception, a facade he was now dismantling. What if people saw through his efforts, accusing him of seeking redemption over the cause itself? The idea was grating. The tabloids continued their relentless scrutiny, dissecting his every move, turning each interaction with Sarah into a headline. Broken Billionaire's Redemption Tour, a plot or a passion? The more he slipped into the advocacy space, the more he wrestled to step out of the limelight that had traditionally glorified his successes. This inner conflict culminated when Sarah suggested they host an informational meeting to discuss health inequity, an event that would see them directly confronting local politicians while bringing the community together. "We need to be seen, Ethan," she said, her gaze piercing through layers of his hesitation. "You can leverage your platform to elevate this problem. We have to show people how this affects real lives. It's about more than charity. This is a fight for justice." Her words resonated, yet Ethan felt the enormity of her challenge. Could he navigate this space authentically? What if his attempt to be transparent only served to muddy the waters of Lily's plight? He was climbing to new heights while tethered to the shadows. Nonetheless, he found an unsettling thrill in imagining a room full of concerned citizens, united to push for change. The thought jostled him from inertia, igniting a renewed sense of hope. As the evening drew on and he stood with Sarah mapping out their plans, Ethan could see the consequences of this shift stretching before him. On the eve of their meeting, the anxiety in his gut roiled like a tempest. He would be exposed, standing not behind a wall of wealth, but right in front of those whose lives were at stake. Would his past failures and current intent overshadow his message? No one could deny he was a billionaire with a tarnished reputation, but Ethan was determined to redefine what that meant. He committed himself to present not just the facts, but the raw, unembellished human stories that encapsulated those numbers. As he adjusted the outline of his speech, he sensed a wavering yet resolute arm reaching out to the truth, a truth he couldn't control or anticipate fully, but one he was willing to embrace. The night before the meeting, Ethan stood before his reflection once again, confronting the stranger within. He was a man straddling two worlds, one of privilege and one of ardent advocacy. The quest wouldn't be easy, molded with fears of failure and the potential alienation from those he cared for. Was it possible to blend the billionaire's image with the voice of a passionate advocate without losing his essence entirely? As he turned off the light in his home, a gnawing realization dawned upon him. His greatest challenge wasn't merely confronting the public, but also overcoming the fear of self-doubt that loomed larger than any external scrutiny. Tomorrow would be the pivotal moment. He was on the brink of stepping into the unknown, putting his motives directly against scrutiny. The question swirled in his mind. Was he prepared to bear the real cost of this fight? The air was heavy with a new truth, one that beckoned him to rise as a figure for change, a harbinger of accountability, a challenge as formidable as any he had faced in the boardroom. But could he survive the fallout of his past while building a future for others? The answer lingered, elusive yet tantalizing, as he whispered a silent promise to his reflection.
Tomorrow, the world would see Ethan in a new light. Ethan awoke to the frail light of dawn, his stomach a cauldron of nerves. The early hour was enveloped in an eerie stillness, the world outside his sprawling estate unperturbed by the whirlwind of change threatening to unfold within him. He dressed meticulously, the suit feeling a bit too constricting, as if it were a reminder of the layers of expectation draped over his life. Each button he clasped felt like sealing a pact with the man he hoped to be, the revolutionary voice he longed to channel. As he arrived at the venue, a modest community center, a creeping sense of foreignness engulfed him. The walls bore witness to countless other causes and struggles, yet today they would glimpse a different paradigm, a billionaire at the crossroads of social equity and personal redemption. A faint echo of the press lingered outside, reminiscent of his former life, where success was measured by wealth rather than impact. The room filled gradually, concerned citizens and advocates shuffling in with whispered murmurs and tentative glances. Ethan's stomach tightened further at the sight of their faces, a medley of hope and skepticism. Would this formerly revered mogul manage to pivot from gold-plated profits to empowering lives? Standing at the small podium, draped with an unassuming cloth, Ethan sought to calm the tempest within. He gripped the edges for support, the wood cool against his palms, grounding him momentarily as he looked out over the sea of expectant eyes.
"Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady yet unsteady, oscillating with pent-up urgency. "I stand before you not as a billionaire, but as a concerned member of this community." The admission felt foreign, yet invigorating. He plunged headfirst into Lily's story, her fragile existence echoing his quest for purpose. As he recounted her struggle, the room fell into a thick silence, each person clinging to the words that painted their community's plight with searing clarity. An unexpected warmth enveloped him, a sense of shared humanity and determination. He glanced at Sarah, standing by the back, her encouraging nod urging him to continue. Yet, with every phrase, doubt crept in like an uninvited guest. Was he truly capable of advocating for a cause that transcended his past? Would the audience dismiss him as a mere player seeking approval? In the depths of his mind, shadows flickered, ghostly traces of skepticism and the fear of being unmasked. But as he spoke of fairness and justice, of the disparity stretching across their city, his voice grew steadier, fueled by a burgeoning determination. Ethan became the embodiment of change he never thought he could be, channeling both anguish and hope into a narrative so raw it transformed the audience's skepticism into visible sympathy. The questions poured in following the talk. Some were pointed, others delicate, but all were soaked in disbelief that this mogul should bear their burdens and shoulder the narratives of their suffering. A woman, weary but composed, challenged him directly. "What makes you different from the others in power who promised us change but delivered nothing?" Ethan felt the weight of her question. This moment wasn't just about words. It was about authenticity, accountability, and vulnerability. "I don't have all the answers," he replied slowly, measuring each word. "But I'm committed to listening and learning from your experiences. My journey has only begun." As the meeting wore on, Ethan sensed a shift in the room. The collective tension morphed into something tangible. Hope seemed to rise like a phoenix as conversations burgeoned around him. He realized this encounter was not merely a series of speeches, but a crucible for growth and understanding. His purpose intertwining with the realities of those afflicted by inequity. He stepped down, pulse racing but heart full. This was just the beginning. The makeup of the room, once filled with apathy, now branched into critical conversations that could spark collective change. Yet, amidst the newly kindled energy, a thought loomed. Would the outside world allow his transformation to thrive?
Or would they overlay his past with preconceived narratives? Ethan left, an uneasy anticipation pooling in his chest. The evening was not merely a checklist for redemption, but rather a doorway that had flung open, offering glimpses of possibility amidst the blaring headlines.
He understood the journey ahead demanded more than mere advocacy. It required resilience, to confront established norms, to navigate the waters of distrust, and to grapple with the complexities of his own identity. As he stepped back into the cool night air, a question burned fiercely in his mind. What sacrifices would he need to make to sustain this newfound purpose, pursuing both his redemption alongside advocating for those who had been relegated to the sidelines? Tomorrow he would find out. But as he stood there, the promise of transformation hung delicately in the night air, ready to mold into something profoundly impactful or utterly unmoored. Ethan spent the night wrestling with thoughts that churned like a stormy sea. Sleep eluded him, every tick of the clock a reminder of the impending choices he faced. The questions from that evening echoed in his mind, each one a small blade prodding at the frail shield he wore against self-doubt. What if he failed? What if he was just a relic, incapable of delivering on the promise of change? At dawn, Ethan rose to face a new day, the remnants of unease still clinging to him. He poured a cup of coffee, its bitterness mirroring the reality of the world he intended to impact. He needed to arm himself with knowledge, understanding that genuine advocacy would require more than heartfelt speeches. He must immerse himself in their struggles. Ethan found himself scrolling through the emails from the community members he met, the narratives rising up as a haunting chorus. Each message was infused with insight, painting vivid portraits of lives overshadowed by injustice. One stood out in particular, Maxine, a single mother struggling to keep her children housed. He could hear her voice in her words, raw and desperate, yet tinged with an unwavering resolve. Without hesitation, he dialed her number, his heart racing. "Hello?" Her voice was warm but weary. "Maxine, it's Ethan. I wanted to hear more about what you're facing." The sincerity of his request hung between them, each word carrying his commitment. As they spoke, the reality of her life seeped into him, every detail another thread weaving into the fabric of his understanding. Maxine detailed the days spent navigating bureaucratic red tape, the sleepless nights wrought with worry over 3 needy children, each moment a cruel reminder of dreams deferred. Her resolve shone through, but was tinged with exhaustion. "I want to help," Ethan said, sincerity threading through his tone. "I need your insights to guide me." Her hesitant laughter broke the tension, reminding him of the fine line between altruism and further harm. "People like you have come and gone," she replied frankly. "What makes you different?" The weight of her skepticism, though deserved, felt like a direct challenge. It sank deep, forcing him to confront his past arrogance and ignorance. "I'm here to listen," he responded. "No flashy promises, just a commitment to understand." They agreed to meet, and as he hung up, Ethan felt something shift within him, an urgent need to redefine his identity. He was no longer just a former mogul, but a student of the struggles he had avoided for so long. The next days blurred into one another as he absorbed facts, stats, and personal stories, each building a deeper empathy. He began to attend local meetings, listening more than speaking, letting the voices of the community wash over him. He no longer sought applause or validation, only the necessary clarity to forge genuine partnerships. But as he immersed himself, a palpable pressure built in the shadows of his mind. There were whispers in the media about his venture, some cheering for change, others deriding him as a publicity stunt, a tarnished savior trying to reclaim relevance. Doubt crept back in, uninvited but persistent. As whispers mingled with fears, the nagging question emerged again. Did he truly belong in this new narrative he was attempting to weave? With every step forward, Ethan faced spectral reminders of the man he had been, a man whose wealth had shielded him from the very issues he was now passionate about.
How could he forge a path intertwined with those he'd once overlooked while banishing the ghost of ego that haunted his every interaction? On one particularly charged evening, Ethan sat in a small cafe after a meeting filled with palpable tension, the air thick with unasked questions. He could feel the weight of anticipation pressing in on him as starkly as the lingering aroma of the coffee. There was a choice looming, one that could reveal his true self, the person he wanted to become, against the backdrop of the shadows of who he once was. Would he rise to meet the challenge, or would he retreat back into the comfortable folds of his old identity? The moment demanded clarity, and the stakes had never been higher. Determination ignited a flicker of confidence, but it was still tempered by uncertainty about the forthcoming confrontation he needed to face. How to truly bridge the chasm between his past and the future he yearned to create. As he took a deep breath, a decisive thought struck him. The time had come to face the truth of his identity in its rawest form. Nothing less than authenticity could open a door to transformation. What cost would that authenticity demand, and would he be willing to embrace it? Ethan's heart raced as he replayed the conversation with Maxine in his mind. The trepidation that had bubbled beneath the surface of his newfound resolve now surged violently, threatening to swallow him whole. He felt the familiar, suffocating grip of insecurity creeping in, and it wasn't just fear of failure, it was the fear of exposing himself as a fraud. How could he wade into waters teeming with genuine suffering without being swept away by it? Determined not to collapse under the weight of his doubts, he made a plan. The upcoming meeting with Maxine loomed large on his calendar, a pivotal juncture that threatened to crystallize his transformation or shatter it entirely. If he truly aimed to make a difference, he needed to venture beyond the personas he had constructed and face the raw, unvarnished reality with her. With this conviction, he set aside distractions and resolved to find strength in vulnerability. He spent the next day diligently researching local housing programs and resources, each piece of information deepening his understanding of the systemic failures that plagued individuals like Maxine. With each statistic he absorbed, a conviction began to take root. He wanted to be not merely an observer, but an advocate who could challenge the status quo. That meant more than just good intentions. It required action, and action birthed from the truth of his experiences. In the hours leading up to their scheduled meeting, Ethan paced his small apartment, rehearsing how to approach Maxine. Would he lead with his pastoral insights, or would he begin with his own mistakes? Each choice felt monumental. The thought of revealing himself seemed both liberating and terrifying, like standing on a precipice over a fathomless abyss. But just as he was about to spiral into a whirlwind of anxiety, he recalled her words, "What makes you different?" That question cracked open a door within him, compelling him to confront the arrogance that had long shielded him. It was time to admit that the layers of wealth and success had kept him blind to the struggles of those without such safety nets. As an exercise in clarity, he wrote down his guiding principles for the meeting: humility, honesty, and a commitment to engage rather than prescribe. In doing so, he committed himself to a conversation by stripping away the cloak of entitlement that had once enveloped him. Finally, the hour arrived. He sat at a modest table in the cafe, hands shaking slightly as he stirred his coffee, watching for Maxine's arrival. When she walked in, her eyes flickering with uncertainty, Ethan felt a resonance he hadn't anticipated. They were both, in that moment, standing at the precipice of transformation. "Ethan," she greeted him, her tone cautious but open. "Maxine," he said warmly, gesturing to the chair across from him, "thank you for meeting me." The conversation began cautiously but quickly deepened as they delved into the realities of her struggles. Ethan made a conscious effort to listen, absorbing every detail of the systemic barriers she faced, the anxiety that hung in the air around her children's future, the dreams diminished under the weight of hardship. It was cathartic to hear her truth, and he could feel walls beginning to crumble, not just around her heart, but around his own. "Why do you care?" she asked once, leaning forward. Ethan considered her question, the core of it echoing with the same skepticism he had sensed before. "I guess because I'm tired of looking away," he admitted. "And I know I need to be part of the solution, not just for people like you, but for myself. There's a disconnect in my life I can't ignore anymore." As they spoke, Ethan began to see empathy not just as a passive response, but as an active force capable of gathering momentum. With each insight he applied from their conversation, he envisioned a pathway forward, not just for himself, but with Maxine leading him into the complexities of advocacy. Yet even as the conversation flowed, a gnawing doubt clung to him. Was this connection genuine, or merely a patch over deeper fractures within him? It was hard to shake the feeling that he was testing the waters of a greater social change while still tethered to his past, a land of comfort that lay just beyond his reach. Ethan left the cafe, feeling light yet burdened by the gravity of potential change. Transformation needed to occur not just within him, but also outside of him, in this fragile partnership he had begun to forge. As the sunlight glinted off the pavement, he realized that the road ahead was fraught with complexity. Would he be able to navigate the storm of public scrutiny and personal transformation, or would he falter at the first sign of resistance? Tomorrow, he'd have to confront his critics, those who viewed his efforts as insincere, and choose whether to stand firm in his convictions or retreat once again into his gilded cocoon. The next day would be monumental, full of revelations that could either cement his new identity or threaten to unravel it completely. Ethan awoke to the morning light filtering through his window, casting an ethereal glow over his cluttered apartment. The remnants of last night's contemplations hung heavily in the air. His pulse was quickened by the impending challenges of the day. The reality of his commitment to advocate alongside Maxine pressed down on him like a weight he had never carried before. He stood to face himself in the mirror, noting the wildness in his own eyes, a reflection of his internal struggle. Every word exchanged with Maxine echoed in his mind, urging him to step beyond the boundaries of his previous life. Today, he would confront not only his critics, but also the inner voices that threatened to delegitimize his efforts. He needed direction, a solid footing as he navigated this precarious new terrain. After a quick breakfast, Ethan dove into his laptop, determined to gather insights about effective advocacy and social justice. He discovered case studies that highlighted successful community initiatives and the undercurrents of public sentiment. Each article imbued him with an understanding that the journey ahead demanded more than just individual action. It required collective empathy, resilience, and strategic planning. But a nagging doubt pulsed in the back of his mind. What if he wasn't prepared? The fear of being perceived as a dilettante controlled his thoughts, constraining his resolve. He remembered Maxine's sincerity, her raw vulnerability, and it ignited an ember of determination within him. The voices criticizing him, friends, family, society, would only extinguish that flame if he allowed them to. Ethan's first stop was a community meeting, an opportunity to listen to those directly impacted by the issues he wished to tackle. As he entered the small community center, he was immediately struck by the palpable energy in the room. People from all walks of life congregated, their faces etched with the weight of their stories. He felt painfully out of place among their lived experiences, yet a part of him was fiercely driven to connect. During introductions, he found himself hesitating, caught between the urge to introduce himself with his usual airs of success and the desire to speak truthfully about his misgivings and motivations. When it was his turn, he took a deep breath. "My name is Ethan. I've been fortunate in life, but I've started to realize that my privilege has blinded me to the struggles that many face. I'm here to learn from all of you."
The sincerity in his voice startled him. It was an admission that felt weighty, yet liberating. As discussions unfolded, Ethan found himself at a crossroads. Faced with individuals sharing heartbreaking testimonies about systemic failure and neglect, he felt an overwhelming urge to help them, but insecurities flickered beneath the surface. In sharing his own past mistakes, would they view him differently or dismiss him as just another privileged outsider? One woman in particular captured his attention, a mother struggling to provide for her children while battling health issues. The vulnerability in her admission resonated with him, compelling him to ask, "What do you think we should do? As someone from a different background, I'm eager to know how I can support you." Her reply was immediate. "Understand us. Listen to our stories without trying to fix things first. If you want to help, start with empathy, not solutions." In that moment, Ethan felt a revelation unfurl within him. The notion that empathy could dismantle barriers was gaining ground in his understanding. He wasn't just a benefactor, he longed to be a partner, an ally who would break down the walls of disconnect. As the meeting drew to a close, Ethan emerged into the sunlight, feeling empowered yet acutely aware of the uphill battle he faced. Could he really forge a path where privilege met advocacy without coming across as a fraud? That question haunted him as he realized tomorrow would present yet another test, a public forum where he would confront the skepticism of his peers head-on. The critical audience would expect polished presentations and facts, but he would need to share something more vulnerable, his own journey of unlearning and understanding intertwined with the faces of those impacted by the injustices he now sought to address. He took a breath, sensing a mixture of dread and determination. The moment of truth was fast approaching, and he was left with a haunting realization. How could he navigate this chasm between intention and impact? It was a question directed not only at the audience, but at his very own soul as well. Ethan woke the next morning with a palpable sense of urgency in his chest. The public forum loomed ahead, demanding him to reconcile intention with action. While he mentally rehearsed the points he wanted to convey, the feeling of inadequacy crept in, wrapping its cold fingers around his resolve. They were remnants of self-doubt, the echoes from the community meeting still fresh in his mind. Could he transform the insights he gleaned without ceasing to be authentic? As he prepared, he decided to refine his presentation with an emphasis on storytelling. He could already envision the audience, expectant gazes and skeptical eyebrows. Instead of bombarding them with statistics or high-minded concepts, would it be enough to weave together his personal journey with those he aimed to help? Or was that also a disguise, a veiling of the privilege he struggled to dismantle? He arrived at the venue early, hoping to compose himself and absorb the ambiance. The walls bore the weight of past discussions that had flickered with hope and frustration, a contrast to how he felt. The wooden floor creaked underfoot, echoing his internal conflict. Sitting in solitude, he pulled out a notebook, each page a canvas for his thoughts. But words eluded him. Anxiety twisted within, prompting the question, what did he truly have to offer? The space soon filled with an assortment of people, activists, concerned citizens, and a few who appeared driven solely by the need for a platform. Ethan watched them, and a sense of disillusionment sparked. If they were expecting him to solve complex issues, wouldn't that be a disservice? The notion settled like a stone. Perhaps his role wasn't to alleviate their burdens, but rather to amplify their voices. How could he convey this articulately to the audience, waiting just beyond the curtain? As he daydreamed, he barely noticed the time slipping away. Soon, the lights dimmed for the presentations to begin. When he was called up, his heart raced, driven by adrenaline and purpose. Standing behind the podium, Ethan steadied himself, acknowledging the sea of expectant faces. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to share my reflections." He sensed the air thickening as he revealed his intention. "Today, I come not as an expert, but as an ally willing to learn. I am here to listen to the stories that often go unheard. I am here to share that I am committed to unlearning my privilege, not to provide quick fixes, but to understand the roots of these injustices." As he spoke, he could feel the room shift. He shared snippets of his experience at the community meeting, particularly the words of the mother whose struggles had struck a profound chord within him. Each phrase built the bridge he sought to lay between their experiences and his newfound understanding of advocacy. Just as he felt a stirring connection with the audience, a voice cut through, sharp and questioning. "If you're serious about this, what are you prepared to sacrifice for those you claim to stand beside?" The directness stunned him. How could he respond? He paused, grappling with his answer. Sacrifice isn't just about giving up something tangible. It's also about giving up the notion that I have the answers, or that I can wield my privilege without consequence. It's about being willing to stand in discomfort, to learn, and to amplify your stories and experiences. But it must begin with listening and building genuine relationships. The tension in the room was palpable, and Ethan recognized this as an invitation to deeper vulnerability. His heart beat faster, aware of the stakes. This moment, fraught with uncertainty, would either solidify his commitment or expose the remains of his imposter syndrome. "Tomorrow, I'll be back to hear more," he concluded, his voice steadying. "Not to speak for you, but to genuinely understand your needs. I am committed to walking this path alongside you, seeking solutions together rather than offering hollow palliatives." As he stepped down, the energy shifted yet again. The audience was mixed. Some were contemplative, while others refrained from comment. Ethan could feel the scrutiny in some pairs of eyes, probing further. The seeds of doubt hadn't vanished. They had merely mutated into an insistent chorus, questioning if he would indeed return. And as he left the venue, he realized he was standing before a daunting precipice. The road ahead would demand sacrifices of character and comfort, but he felt an unfamiliar sensation brushing against his fears, a flicker of hope. Tomorrow's dialogue awaited, urgent and unresolved. Could he sustain this newfound authenticity under pressure? With every intention he harbored, the answer to that question loomed larger as he navigated the challenges ahead. What emerged next would determine the future not only of his journey, but the trust he hoped to forge with those he aimed to serve. The question echoed within him, propelling him into the uncertainty of the next day. Would he, against all odds, be the ally they needed? Or would his privilege once again prove a barrier to the genuine connection he sought? Ethan stirred awake again the following morning, but this time the anxiety that had gripped him was tinged with an urgency that suggested readiness. The troubling voice from the audience still lingered, challenging him in the dark corners of his mind. What did sacrifice truly mean, and how prepared was he to defend the path he had chosen? With those questions pulsating, he knew he had to confront the uncertainty head-on. He stared at the reflections staring back from the bathroom mirror, considering the man he had presented the night before, an ally, a listener, perhaps a friend. Yet he felt a hollow twinge as he recalled the skeptical eyes. What made him worthy to talk about sacrifice when he hadn't truly faced the kind of loss others live daily? His steps toward understanding were still fresh and tentative. As he sat with his coffee and an open notebook filled with scattered thoughts, Ethan began mapping out the day's agenda. He decided to visit the same community center where those voices resided. Each name he had scribbled down from the previous meeting flickered in his mind, promising a reminder of their struggles, their authenticity. The simple act of listening was going to be his guiding principle moving forward. It felt daunting, but necessary. Arriving at the center brought a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Community beginnings were often fraught with tension, a delicate dance of intentions colliding.
He found the main auditorium already buzzing with activity as people gathered, some familiar, others new. The atmosphere vibrated with hope and a deep-seated skepticism, a tension he intended to navigate with care. "Ethan!" A familiar voice rang out, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Anna, a local activist he had briefly spoken with before. Her passion was palpable, and as she approached, Ethan felt the weight of the challenge ahead. "Are you truly ready for this? Listening isn't always easy," she warned, her tone encouraging yet sharp. "I need to be," Ethan replied earnestly. "I want to understand, but I dread failing to connect." "Failure is just part of the process," she said, her eyes holding a depth of experience. "Embrace it and be honest. They'll see through pretense." This struck a chord deep within him. Was he prepared to embrace vulnerability, to step back and allow others to shape the narrative? As the meeting commenced, Ethan focused intently on the stories being shared. Each voice intertwined with the next, a symphony of struggles, resilience, and occasional bursts of joy. Through their stories, he began to sift through the complex web of experiences that shaped their realities. Their laughter and sorrow painted a vivid picture far removed from the world he inhabited. He jotted down notes, more focused on understanding than assessing. But reality crashed into his revelation when the session grew tense. A heated exchange erupted between two participants about a recent policy change that disproportionately affected them. One voice, worn and tired, rose above the others, demanding accountability from those he felt were complicit in their suffering.
"Your privilege keeps you safe. How can you know our pain?" the man articulated, a tremor of hurt underscoring his accusation. Ethan felt his heart harden, grappling with the truth of the words. For a fleeting moment, he thought about retreating, to withdraw into the safety of ignorance, yet he clung to the resolve he had built. "How can I help bridge that gap?" he asked, his voice steady. "I want to walk this path alongside you, not as an expert, but as a willing listener. I'm here to learn from you." The room quieted, his declaration hanging in the air like unresolved tension. A moment of silence followed before another voice broke through, this one softer yet steely. "Then share our stories. Make sure we're seen. We need more than empathy. We need voices echoing our pain in spaces where it matters." In that moment, Ethan realized that his role was not merely to bear witness, but to advocate. The time had come to confront the truth within himself. He had started a journey of personal awakening, yet now it demanded a leap of faith. Could he be the catalyst for change they needed? As the meeting concluded, he caught Anna's knowing gaze, and with it came an unspoken understanding. Today was just the beginning. The stakes had escalated, but he sensed momentum building. The struggle was real, and so was the urgency to act with intention. He left the center feeling both emboldened and afraid. Reflecting on the day's exchanges, he acknowledged an increasing commitment, not just to listen, but to amplify. The question loomed larger now. How could he integrate this newfound sense of responsibility into his daily life? In the distance, he observed the sun dipping lower, the world before him unwrapped yet again with uncertainty. Who would he become as this ally, as a voice for the unheard? Tomorrow would require him to face those questions anew, not as an observer, but as an active participant. The path was unfolding, and the time had come to face the vulnerability of presence, and possibly take a step deeper into the fire. The dawn of a new day found Ethan Parker invigorated in a sense of purpose. Last night's meeting had indelibly impressed upon him the weight of his journey,
The seriousness of his commitment to authenticity, empathy, and advocacy. It was no longer a question of simply boasting the role of a benevolent benefactor. It required him to fully embody a genuinely engaged ally. He stood in front of the mirror, noting the determination etched into his expression. No longer was he merely a self-proclaimed billionaire. He had transformed into an advocate, eager to help shape policies that would create tangible change for families like Maxine's. With every conviction he had embraced, he felt the shackles of his wealth's past loosen. This time, he was to relinquish the armor that had long shielded him from accountability. Ethan entered the community center that day with upturned shoulders and an open heart, ready for dialogue rather than monologue. He had gathered his notes, not as a script for yet another presentation, but as tools for connection, a strategy to help amplify the narratives of those who had been fighting battles he had only just begun to hear about. The atmosphere buzzed with a mixture of excitement and skepticism, but the blurred lines thrummed with unrecognized potential. As he wandered through the space filled with the community, he absorbed the vitality of shared stories, setting aside the notes to listen wholeheartedly to the lives unfolding before him. "Ethan, you're back," Maxine greeted him. Her bright smile illuminated the room, and he was struck by the honesty in her gaze. "With a promise to listen," he replied without hesitation. "I want to learn how we can work collaboratively." As the meeting progressed, conversation flowed steadily, and Ethan seized moments to elevate experiences, sharing personal anecdotes that connected with the larger systemic issues at hand. Neither fabricated nor oversimplified, he brought truth to his story while aligning it with theirs. Moments of vulnerability tethered them, knitting a tapestry of connection that felt raw yet invigorating. Every story shared dug deeper into the collective understanding of their struggle. Ethan positioned himself as not merely a spectator, but a crucial part of the narrative. He wasn't there to provide a solution, but to construct a sturdy foundation built on transparency and trust. After several hours of dialogue, a feedback session emerged. Participants began outlining their needs, direct calls for support, advocacy efforts, and reminders that their voices were valid and should carry weight. It was as if they unleashed a tide of collective resilience, demanding change, not from the sidelines, but front and center. "Ethan, with your resources and connections, you have a responsibility to lift our stories into the light," one young woman urged, her eyes aflame with determination. "Let's do it together," he urged back, feeling momentum building as each word echoed through the room. "I will work tirelessly to ensure their voices reach those in power. We can create awareness through direct action, storytelling, and compelling advocacy." Concrete plans emerged from that whirlwind of discussion: community engagement initiatives, health equity campaigns, and collaborations with local politicians. His commitment solidified with every piece of feedback, a foundation based on shared direction rather than top-down directives. And then came the moment that altered the trajectory of his newfound commitment. He proposed the launch of a collaborative advocacy campaign centered around storytelling. This was not just about raising funds. This was about elevating authentic, lived experiences into the forefront of public discourse, transforming narratives into beacons of necessary change. As the room erupted into spirited discussion, Ethan felt oppressive shadows dissipate. Vulnerability morphed into confidence. This was not a solitary journey burdened by past arrogance, but a symphony of amalgamated voices demanding justice. Afterward, as the crowd gradually dispersed, Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment settle over him. It was unlike any business deal he'd ever brokered, grounded not in profits, but meaningful, lasting impact. Outside, the sun dipped low, but the future felt radiant. Vibrancy enveloped him as he drove home. The weight of his previous identity lifted, restructured in the crucible of communal resilience and integrity. Just before he reached the gates of his estate, his phone buzzed with a message from Maxine. "Thank you for committing to our voices.
Together, we can create the change we desperately need." His heart swelled, pride punctuated by humility. Ethan Parker was no longer merely a billionaire grappling with repentance. He was an advocate, a collaborator, a bridge between the worlds he once stood divided. With clarity coursing through him, he recognized the tangible impact they could achieve together. This journal wasn't just a distraction from his past. It was the birth of a commitment to authentic personal achievement, intertwined with the shared anticipations of those whose lives intersected with his own. He had discovered purpose beyond wealth, a reclamation of his narrative, finally aligning his values with his actions. As he reflected, he resolved to nurture this newfound identity relentlessly, championing the voices of the overlooked while risking his own convictions. In this dance of vulnerability and purpose, the echoes of tomorrow were no longer distant dreams, but tangible frameworks taking shape surrounding him. The transformation was profound, both for Ethan and those willing to rise with him. Now more than ever, he dedicated himself to this cause: clarity in intent, strength in resolve, and unity with those who dared to share their stories. As he stepped into the next chapter of his life's work, he felt an invigorating rush. A profound understanding had emerged, and this time he was ready to embrace every challenge that lay ahead. And you, reading this, must act now. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that fuel personal transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support these impactful narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about this journey, sharing your insights. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and inspire their own paths to change. You need to subscribe now because this is the moment to show your support for authentic, personal overcoming stories. Don't wait even one more second to share this message.